said, oh dear, we still can't distinguish between all these people coming with these stars, because more and more A-levels are dictating in very precise terms what it is in order to get these sort of grades. Hence an increasing teaching to those particular grades. The result of that is that so many people are getting these grades, therefore the university now is having its own special tests. Now you've got people knowing these tests, you've got special coaching institutes coaching people to get these tests. The result of this coming out of the Chief Inspector's report, take mathematics, I'm on a working party, for example, at the Royal Society now on STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Coming from these people, coming from the mathematics counts by Smith in 2004, they're saying even the people with really good grades are not adequately prepared for higher education. They haven't got the understanding. They've been trained with the 4 million one thing and another. So we've got a whole machinery on that kind of business target-hitting level, which may suit certain purposes, but is actually failing educationally, even the most able young people. And that, I think, is a matter of great. And I'd like to see leadership, is where the principals of the schools, are themselves beginning to protest against what is really happening and the destruction, to my mind, of what really it is to educate young people. Yeah.
You mentioned Pring. Actually, I am a PhD student and I want to be on the concept of reflective practice.
The concept of?
Reflective practice.
Yes.
Reflective thinking.
Yes.
Especially in education. Keeping in view your view of this ethical development and ethical dimension, which should permeate the whole education system. Do you think the present initial teacher education system actually prepares those teachers who actually can go there and implement this kind of model?
Well, I think that, I'm sure many, I hope.
Yes, just because there is a thinking that this kind of initiative is actually producing teachers who are more technicians in,
yes.
In their thinking than in creating reflective.
Well, you see, if you to go back, take this university, I don't know about who you appoint now here in Leicester, but certainly it once upon a time had very significant philosophical presence within the training of teachers, where these questions were being asked in initial training. But I don't know what the position is now here in Leicester. If you take Oxford, there's been for 120 years a whole tradition of philosophy being at the actual basis of the initial training of students ever since 1894, when the School of Education was set up there. Now there is nobody at the Oxford department who's been appointed lecturing level to do any kind of philosophical work. It is totally absent. There's no history of education. You think of this place, you think of people like Brian Simonson. I don't know now whether history of education is now, for people to being able to see where our roots are educationally. I don't think that comes. If you go to almost any school of education now, in this country, you'll find that philosophy and history of education are almost completely absent from so those questions are not being encouraged during initial training, at least in that sort of discipline way. And certainly now, teacher education, initial teacher training is, you've got your standards, and you've got to meet those sort of standards. And those standards are, more or less equated with targets. And standards and targets are not the same, but nonetheless, that's it. So I think that management, that new management, as it were, that came in the 80s, 90s, permeates everything, and I think does get it down. That's not to say these questions are not raised, it's not to say that very good students, ordinary students, are not thinking about these issues, but they're not at the forefront of initial training. And more or less, you go back to, to continuing professional development, CPD, then you'll find that a lot of that now is not shaped as it once was by the teaching profession, but it's shaped very much by what can we do in order to meet the latest sort of intervention from the government and what have you. Once again, wide variations, but that is certainly a point. So, to my mind, how can we, now I think, for example, And I'm highly supportive. I think one of the things that real mistakes that we made when I was in charge of the Oxford department was not really to fight for the Ed.D. there, where people are engaged in the kind of research which I think is being encouraged here. And it's very difficult. I'm just trying to get part-time degrees going there. But we haven't got that going. I know that they're probably thinking about it now, but maybe a bit too late to get started in the present conditions. But I think the Ed.D. is one way in which teachers, often part-time, engaging in Ed.D. can be engaging in that reflective practice, or the teachers who are working on, and part of that reflective practice, as it is in one's own life, I hope, is raising in the very centre the values that underpin. If people were really engaged as a system in that kind of thinking, would we have made the arts and the humanities optional at the age of 14, which is about the only country in Western Europe where that is the case? Would we have got an assessment system such as we've got at the moment? Those questions are being asked. So I think engaging in that kind of continual reflective practice and providing the framework in which that can take place within the partnership between schools is absolutely crucial.
So how do you actually see the future of teacher education going out of university completely?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we are arguing for, and I must have addressed now, God knows how many conferences, various ways around, is how can you ensure that the future of the professional development of teachers is itself going to be much more in the hands of the teachers themselves, in which there's going to be an entitlement to that, and in which, you know, at the very centre of that, as teachers work together, so they will engage in that kind of reflective practice which embodies the sort of values and so on. But you've always got that kind of difficulty in school where you've got a system which can be fairly strict, I'd say oppressive in terms of what it's saying you've got to do, and how much then teachers can still feel, as it were, sufficiently free of that in order to engage in their real educational thinking. And I think one of the things that we have come across, and we've done it in our report quite a lot, is we came across constantly the ways in which teachers were doing this, where there was some exciting things going on, and often supported by such foundations as the Paul Hamlin Foundation, Musical Futures, absolutely incredible, transforming musical education in certain schools. The RSAs, the Royal Society of the Arts, opening minds. One saw things from Skids and so on. One saw family links, you know, working with parents in the primary schools. So you are seeing these initiatives really coming from schools with outside support. And one of the things that has evolved, partly as a result of the Nuffield Review, but I mean, a bit independently, is bringing together things like these various foundations and schools and so on in a thing called whole education. I don't like it. In which we're developing this wider capacity of getting real pressure groups and politicians and so on involved in thinking much more widely, you know, about education. So it's partly a political thing, and it's partly, as it were, giving the opportunities for teachers to be engaged in this kind of thinking much more systematically. I'm sure they are doing so individually.
Yes, I was just going to really position the ED fascinates me. As I do the programme leader, I've seen many teacher leaders coming through. I think that all teachers these days have some element of leadership within their particular role, whether you see that as leadership or whether you see that as management. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think there's an aspect of management and leadership, but I can't have for one moment. Indeed, I mean, as a sort of former leader myself in school, the opportunities for engaging with these professional programs is fraught with difficulties. And actually, the resistance from your own profession, I'm afraid, is still out there, as difficult as that might sound. So teachers who are actually doing, you know, in secondary situation, master's degrees, that seems fine and fair.
Yeah.
For those who are coming to do doctorates, whether that's by a PhD route or by an MD route, we may be making some ground on that. We may be making